All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Again, some of you guys may have heard this or not. Depends if you were on class or not. But I do apologize for the delay of this video. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this, and again, I've had a lot going on, uh, but it's here now. So um, let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. Okay. Now, today's lesson. There we go. We're going to talk about the transition of power. We're going to talk about the election of 1800. We're also going to be talking about the Alien and Sedition Act. Now, something that was created by one of the administrations of our government, just because they didn't like what people were saying about them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the warm up. So here's your warm up picture. Now, as I explained in class, duels, that's exactly what this is. When two people um, they have an argument about something and they feel that, hey, the best way to settle this is with the guns. They take 10 paces, they turn, shoot. Each side gets one bullet. All right. Now, why did these guys do this? I mean, everything under the sun you can think of. So from anything from I didn't like the way this guy said things about me, he called me a name, all the way to this guy killed my brother or he slept with my wife. Things like that. So everything you can imagine in between was a reason why people had duels. Okay. But this one in this picture is one of America's most famous duels. And what I want to know from you is this. Just throw like a Hail Mary pass. What do you think this duel was about? Okay. Do you think it was something like really dumb, like he called him a name? Or do you think it was something like all the way to this other side where it's like one of the guys killed the other guy's brother or slept with his wife or something? So where do you think? What do you think it may have been? Okay, but remember, just keep in mind that this was one of America's most famous duels. Okay, so pause the video, write your response. Okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. Alrighty. So here's the thing. Remember, George Washington left as president. George Washington is the only president not to have a political party. Because again, both sides liked him, so he figured, why choose one side and tick off the other side? Now, with that being said, too, at the very end, he did mention that political parties were going to tear up this country, and that's basically what happened. As soon as he was gone as president, these two parties, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, started separating more and more. They did not work together as well as they did when Washington was president. Now, the group, the Anti-Federalists, decided, you know what? That name sounds horrible. Anti-Federalist sounds like we're bad guys or evil men. So they're like, we need something else. We need something more patriotic, something that says American. Democratic Republicans. Yeah, Democratic Republicans, as opposed to Anti-Federalist. Democratic Republicans. Sounds so much better. So that's what they did. And as time went on, people stopped calling them Democratic Republicans and just straight called them Republicans. Now, excuse me, the Federalists were in charge of Congress. The Federalists had the president, which was John Adams, as president. And they didn't like what some of these Republican people were saying about them. They didn't like the criticism that was given about them. So they passed this thing called the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798. So what did this do? Well, the Sedition Act, let's look at that part first. It made it a crime to verbally or print in newspapers false, scandalous, or malicious things against the federal government or government officials. So you couldn't say anything bad, like saying like, "Oh, I heard that the president has extra wives and children that he keeps, under the stairs and things like that." So that kind of stuff made it illegal to say that kind of things about the president. You couldn't say anything like, "Oh, the government's going to come in and take your guns away, and they're going to do this. What proof do you have? So false, scandalous, malicious lies. People who verbally said that or put it down on uh, newspapers and things like that, they were basically charged. It was a crime. Now, the first part, the Alien Act part. Basically, anyone who comes to this country who's not born here, they are a foreigner or an alien. Okay. Now, a lot of these people who come in to America at that time were from countries where the British conquered. The British took over an area of that land or neighboring countries. So a lot of foreigners coming from other countries came to the United States and they didn't like the British. And that's what these Republicans were saying. Hey, you hate Britain? You should join our party. We hate Britain too. So when they became citizens, a lot of these people voted Republicans just for the simple fact that the Republicans didn't like Britain. Now, with this new Alien Act, uh, it made it a lot harder for these people coming into the country to become citizens. And just like now, if a person who's not a citizen gets in trouble, gets arrested, they can be deported, without a trial. And that's what happened. Some of these people were rounded up and, arrested. And when boats would come by and be like, hey, where are you going? I'm going back to Italy. Here, take these guys with you. You know, that's the way it was. Now, in 1798, 1799, states and individuals started fighting back against the government, saying, hey, you know what? You can't do that. You can't tell us we can't criticize the government. If we want to say the government sucks, we can do that. That's in our First Amendment right. Not only a freedom of speech, but also the redress of grievance of government. If we don't like how things are going, we can say we don't like how things are going without fear of being punished. You know. So yeah, eventually they did win. So the election of 1800. This was a big one. This is basically our fourth election our country had. And we end up having a tie for president between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. The way it worked was like this. You got a list of people. Who did you want as president? And people would vote. I want this person. I want this person. I want this person. And whoever got first was president. Whoever got second place was vice president. But this time there was a tie, Jefferson and Burr. So then it became like, well, what do we do? Do we have like an election, another one? What do we do? So they were like, okay, well, let's have the House of Representatives because the House of Representatives represent the people, right? And it's what the people want as president. So they had a meeting. And just like the election, it was split 50-50. Okay, so it was split. And then it came down to like people talking to Congress, House of Representatives. And one of the people who was very influential in talking to the House of Representatives was a Federalist named Alexander Hamilton. Now, Alexander Hamilton, if you remember from the last lesson, and Jefferson did not get along. They basically hated each other. So when Jefferson heard that Hamilton was going to talk to the House of Representatives, it was kind of like, oh, man, dang it. I was so close. He's going to tell them to vote for Burr. He hates my guts. Ah, man, this sucks. Well, to Jefferson's surprise, he hears the news that no, Alexander Hamilton told people you should really vote for Jefferson. And Jefferson's like, what? He did what? Because here's the thinking of Alexander Hamilton. He basically realized, yeah, Jefferson and himself didn't get along, but when Jefferson talked to you, he told you basically where he stood. He told you, hey, what was on his mind. He told you, this is where we stand, you and me. All right. He wasn't going to tell you things just to make you happy and please you and tell you things you wanted to hear. Aaron Burr, on the other hand, he did do that. Burr was one of those people who would talk to you um, and make you feel good and things like that. And once he got what he wanted, off he went and left you in the dust because he got what he wanted. You know, he did not stand up for anything. He really just, you know, do what he had to do to get what he wanted. And that's the type of man that Hamilton was like, he shouldn't be president. Okay. And this is where Aaron Burr gets mad at Alexander Hamilton for that. And they have a duel. That's what the warm up picture was. And he shoots and kills Alexander Hamilton. Okay. So, yes, we had a vice president that shot and killed somebody in a duel. Yes, we did. Okay. Now, here's another thing that really shocked the world. The Federalists, they gave up their power to the anti-Federalists, Democratic Republicans. And this shocked the world again, because remember, Washington stepped down from power. People are like, oh my God, somebody can do that? A person can step away from power? And now here's a whole political group that's basically saying, we lost, you guys won, here's the power of the government. To give the power just like that really shocked people around the world. Go, wow, maybe this little experiment in the US, maybe this is something we should look at. And again, that's what makes us unique compared to a lot of places around the world. When one political power loses, they give the other political power, the power. They give it to them. They don't fight. They don't say, well, we don't recognize your election. That's not what the people really want. No, we're going to stay in power. No, we don't do that. We're not like that. We transition. Okay. Now, with the election of 1800 came the 12th Amendment, which basically says that there are going to be separate ballots, one for president, one for vice president, so that this whole type of thing won't ever get mixed up again. And later on, they'll change that again too. Okay. So on the last day of Adams' presidency, he appoints a bunch of federal judges. Now remember, judges are judges for life. Okay. And he's like, I want all these people to be judges. He's passing out, letters saying, hey, you're a judge, you're a judge, you're a judge, you're a judge, you're a federal judge, you're a federal judge. And the next day, when Jefferson becomes president, the first thing he does is he tells his new Congress, stop all those letters from going out. Send them letters saying, hey, sorry, there's a misunderstanding. You're no longer a judge. Sorry, you're no longer a federal judge. Things like that. So they're sending out all these letters. Again, stopping some of them, still turning in a bunch of them saying, hey, you're not a judge. You're not a judge. We're withholding the paperwork. You're not confirmed yet, so you're not a federal judge. One person never got their letter. He never got the letter from the president saying, from Jefferson saying that you're not a judge. And that was William Marbury. So Marbury gets his letter saying, hey, he's a judge. He goes to work. He's like, hey, I'm a federal. He goes, yeah, I am. I'm a federal judge. They go, no. Didn't you get your letter from Jefferson saying you're not one? He's like, no. I got this letter from Adams saying I'm a judge. And they basically looked through the paperwork and realized, darn it, they missed one. And they try to tell him, no, you're not a judge. So he sues them in the Marbury versus Madison case. Now, he does win eventually, but the thing is, this court case shows that anything that's dealing with the Constitution, those kind of court cases belong to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court makes the ultimate decision whether some right was violated or it wasn't. They're the be all to end all type of thing. Okay. Now, when Jefferson was becoming president, when he was running for president, he basically told his people, people in his political party, I'm going to lower the power of the government. The government's way too powerful. The president is way too powerful. When I'm there, when I'm elected, I'm going to bring down those powers. So that's his goal. Okay. Now, what does he do as president? Well, one of the things he does, which is pretty impressive, he actually pays off our national debt. So our debt at one point was actually zero. We didn't owe anybody any money. Okay. But here's the problem: he gave our last dollar to pay off our debt. Awesome. Cool. Great job. You see these people over here, they work for the government and they need to get paid. So how are we going to pay them? They need to get paid now. We have no money. How are we going to do that? And that's where we had to borrow money. So we were debt free for a little bit, and then we ended up having to pay, borrow money to pay people. So the other thing he did was cut government tax spending. He was like, well, why are we spending so much money on this and this and that? You know, why? Let's cut that. He even trimmed the armed forces. He was like, why are we spending, so much money on buying 10 ships? We're not at war. Just pay for two and the rest, no. He would look going, why we have 100,000 soldiers when we're not at war? Keep like 50,000 of them, you know? Otherwise, we're just paying for these guys to just chill out. We have to feed them, clothe them, pay them. Might as well just keep half of them, you know? Now, what you're seeing right now is our national debt right now as of October 26th at 3:48 p.m. This is our national debt. So if you look at the red numbers, that's how much we owe. And if you can't read that number, I'll read it for you. That is 31,238,996,100,000 we owe. Yeah. So remember I told you when Jefferson got our debt down to zero, that red number you see where it says US national debt was zero. If you want to break it down, for every man, woman, and child in our country, we would all have to pay $93,725 per person. Now, for every taxpayer, so let's say kids, kids don't have to pay. Let's just say people who work, who pay taxes, things like that. Every one of us would have to pay $247,882 to clear out our debt. That's quite a bit. I don't know anyone who has that number, but there you go. So here are your questions at the end. The first one was, what was your first thought when you saw how much we owed? That $31 trillion and all that, billions and millions. What was the first thought that popped in your head when you saw that number? All right. The second one is this: do you think our debt will ever be zero again? Why or why not? Explain that one. Now, I don't mean like it's going to be our debt's going to be zero tomorrow or 5 years from now or 10 years, but maybe 100, 200 years from now. Do you think our debt will be zero at all during a time our country's in existence? Do you think we'll ever get back down to zero? Why or why not? Okay. Now, once you've answered this question, you're done with this lesson. So good job. Way to go. All right. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Okay. So you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.